Setting up GitHub Actions like we did in the previous video is great, but we can do so much more. In this video, I'm going to be introducing you to a couple of advanced ways that you can use GitHub Actions inside your workflows. I just want to do a massive shout out to everyone that entered the competition last week to win one of 5 AWS exam vouchers. Here are the 5 winners, and I'll be in contact with you about how you can claim your prize. The first and probably most important upgrade you can do to your GitHub Actions workflow is to set it up to deploy to multiple AWS accounts. Now, there are loads of advantages to having different accounts for different environments, but I'm gonna just quickly outline the 2 biggest. If you're already familiar with multi-AWS accounts, then you can just skip to about here, where we'll be looking at how we can set it all up. The 2 biggest reasons you might want to use different AWS accounts for your different environments are isolation and process control. Being able to completely isolate your environments by having your dev environment in one AWS account and your production environment in a second is really important. This isolation means that there is nothing you could do in that development account which would affect the production workflows. It also means, because you've got separate AWS accounts, it's really easy to control who has access to do what in which environment. You can say that developers have pretty much full reign to do what they want inside that development account, and you know that nothing they can do will break production. The second part is strengthening the dependence on infrastructure as code and process. If you were to have all of your environments in a single AWS account, it would be very easy to just manually set a secret for your dev, your QA, and your production all in one place at once. This means you never really know what is completely required to deploy your architecture, because there may be some manual steps, such as secrets or parameters, that aren't documented and aren't part of the infrastructure as code. These 2 major reasons, as well as a couple of other benefits, are why every time I start working with a new client, I always get them to set up 3 AWS accounts, one for a development, a QA, and a production environment. So now we know why we want to use multiple environments, let's jump onto the computer and see how we can set up GitHub Actions to deploy to different AWS accounts. Now we're in the code, let's quickly review what we did in the last video, which was setting up a basic GitHub action. We have a default serverless package here using the AWS NodeJS TypeScript template. The only thing we changed was added a workflows folder, and then the file that we're looking for is called reusableworkflow.yaml. So I'm just going to copy that and paste that in there. Now, this does have some required variables and inputs. So we use the with statement and set a stage to be prod. As well as that, we need to pass in the secrets, and the secrets were an AWS access key and AWS secret access key. So I'm actually just going to copy these like that and paste those in. But the difference is we now have to have a secret for both development and production, and if we wanted it a QA or integration environment as well. So we need to change the secret inside our repo. In our case, I'm going to change this to prod_AWS access key and prod_AWS secret access key. This just means that we know when we're running this master branch, we're using a stage of prod, and we're using the AWS access keys that point to the production account. So if I save this, the easiest thing I can do to now create it for a different branch is copy and paste but I'm going to change this from deploy master to deploy-dev. In here, we can say on the push to the branch of dev, change the name of the workflow, change the stage to dev, and finally find the prod at the start of the access key and secret access key and change them to dev. So now we've set this up so we have both a deploying to dev workflow that deploys when dev is triggered. Also, when master is pushed to, it will deploy to production. Now, the one thing we do need to do is we need to set up AWS access keys and secrets for both of those environments. If we go back into our repo and to our action secrets, inside here, what we need to do is actually remove the existing AWS access key and secret. And we have to confirm that we want to remove both of these. The reason we need to remove them is that so that they don't get passed in inside the reusable workflow here. Now what we need to do is add the extra secrets and keys. So I'm going to do that quickly, but that is exactly the same as before, creating a user, taking the credentials and then saving them to this repo. So I'll get back to you when that is done. So now we have all 4 of the secrets. Whenever we deploy to the appropriate branch, it will pull one of these 2 pairs into the script and then pass that in to the reusable workflow. That will then use that as part of the deployment and actually deploy using those credentials. I now want to test this out, so I'm going to git checkout -b and dev to check out a new branch, git add everything and git commit with a nice message of something like adding reusable workflows. And now I've done that, I can git push. It's going to create a new branch. Now that that branch has been created, we can head back into our GitHub account, go to our actions, and we can see that the dev deployment branch is being triggered. We can see that that is using the deploy-dev.yaml, which is then going to be passing the correct stage and AWS credentials into the reusable workflow. Whilst that is actually running, we can head back into our code and this time check back out master, so git checkout master and git merge dev. So all of those changes that were just in the dev branch are now in master. I can now git push, which is now going to trigger the master workflow. So if I go back to actions, I can see that there is now a different workflow that is being triggered by the master branch, and it is queued up waiting for the first one to complete. So I'll get back to you once this is all done so that we can look at the results. So now both of those pipelines have finished. We can have a look at, first let's have a look at the dev one. So in here, one job has completed. And if we look at the serverless deploy part and we scroll down, we can see that we have compiled and we have deployed this service. As well as that, if we go into our other actions and look at our master branch, and if we go in here, we can see that the exact same processes have finished, but this time we have passed in the stage of prod, so the GitHub Actions now are called prod hello. So that has all completed. We can also check this out in our AWS account. If I go into my production master account, then I can see that GitHub Actions -prod-hello was deployed just 4 minutes ago, but there isn't a GitHub Actions dev hello. That's because that is in a different AWS account. So if I jump into that different AWS account, I can now see the GitHub Actions dev hello. That means we've got a single repo which is successfully deploying to 2 different AWS accounts. Now we can take GitHub Actions even further, and if we go back into our code, we can start doing more with the stage, such as deciding whether to run tests in certain environments or not. So I'm going to set up some basic tests, and then we can show you how we can decide whether we want to run the tests as part of the workflow. So I've now added Jest to this repo and added a simple test to the hello handler. And in my terminal, I can now run npm run test. And this will use Jest to just do a very simple test on that endpoint. Obviously, if you were doing this in a real environment, you'd want to be able to test all of your functions with unit and ideally with integration tests as well. With this test working, what we can do is we can start adding that to our reusable workflow. So in our reusable workflow.yaml, after we've done our npm CI, we can add a new step, and this is going to be a run step of npm run test, just as we did in the terminal. And if we committed this, every time someone tries to merge something into either dev or production branch, then the tests will be run. But what happens if you don't always want to run your tests every time some code goes into dev? Or more likely, what happens if you only want to run a subset in development, but want to run more tests, such as a smoke test, in production? So what you can do is you can actually use some statements in here. So if, and then this if statement is going to be $, as we've used with some other variables before, inputs.stage double equals, and then I'm going to say prod and save this. So what this is going to say is this is going to run the npm run test only if the stage input is prod. This means I can commit this into the development branch and none of the tests will run. We can check that out by checking out the dev branch. So git check out dev, git add dot. We can now also merge those changes from dev into master and see how the workflows are different. So now we can head over to our GitHub account and go back to our actions, and we should see again there are 2 new workflows running. Now the dev branch has completed, we can look inside this workflow, and inside this job we can see it goes through the steps, but when it runs the npm run test step, it actually skips it because obviously the stage in this case does not equal prod, so it didn't want to run that stage. If we go back and now look at the master version, in here, when we go into this, we can see that this time it did run the tests. And if we open up here, we can see that there were 1 passed and 1 total test suites, which is exactly what you'd expect. Obviously, just doing tests or not doing tests is a relatively simple use case, but you can use this if statement for much more advanced things. If you're liking this video so far, make sure to smash that like button, as it really helps share this video with more developers just like yourselves. The next advanced GitHub Actions tip I've got for you is if we scroll down to our jobs, we can see here that we have a matrix, and what we've done is we've cut this down to just being 1. That means it will run all of these steps just on node 14, and when you're deploying serverless, that is obviously a really good thing because you know that your version of node running inside the Lambda is going to be exactly the version that you've set. If you are deploying, say, a system that is going to be used by, let's say, some IoT devices or used on lots of different devices, then you might not be absolutely certain what version of node they're running. What you can do is you can actually change this So change this to 12.x, 14.x, and 16.x, and it will run all of these steps for all 3 node versions so that you know you have a full coverage for all of the environments that could be running your tool. As I said before, in our case with serverless, chances are we're not going to be doing this. What we might want to be able to do is deploy our environment to multiple different regions. To do this, we could add a region matrix, and I'm going to go with EU-West-1, as well as AP South 1 and US East 2. Now what I can do is I can copy this matrix syntax here, go down to my args, and in here put in -- region, and then use matrix - region. And what this should do is this should now deploy this setup to all 3 of our regions that we've selected. Another advanced GitHub Actions tip is that if you decide that you want to have things split down a little bit more, then you can actually create multiple jobs. So we have a deploy job, but you could have, for example, a build job, a test job, and then a deploy job. And you can say that one job depends on the other. In our case, we may want to have a deploy job and then another job which actually tests the deployed environment after it has been published. So what we can do is go down to the end of our jobs and add a second job here. So in here we want to say that we have a new post deploy job, and this is going to have a name of post deploy test. This is going to be slightly different though, because we can add in here a needs section and say that this job needs the previous job of deploy to have succeeded. If the previous deploy job does not succeed, then this job never starts running. And then you can have the normal runs on, and that is going to be Ubuntu latest, and then finally some steps. And in this case, this might just have a single run step of .post deploy tests.sh, and if we wanted, we can even pass in the region or the stage. So if we copy the stage from the inputs, we can pass that in so that our script knows which stage it is meant to be testing. If you are creating quite a few different repos, all doing something similar, so using serverless to deploy an application, you might end up with a workflow that looks something like what we've got here, and you want to be able to use that as a default in multiple repos. Well, if we go into our GitHub, we can actually create a starter workflow. We do that by creating a repo in our organization called .github and uploading our templates to a workflow templates directory inside that repo. There's a little bit of setup we need to do around the organization, but this will allow us to create a new repo, and inside our repo automatically add one of these template workflows to the repo from the UI. This is nice as it saves copying and pasting files around, but then once you've used that default workflow, you can modify it if there are any changes required for that specific repo. The final advanced serverless actions tip I want to give you today is that when you're setting up the passwords and the secrets inside here, obviously every time you create a new repo, you're going to have to either copy these from somewhere else or create new access keys and secrets, which obviously can get very laborious. If you're a company that does have lots of different projects and different repos, what you can do is you can actually set up secrets for an organization. What you need to do is go into the organization on the top right, and if you click inside your organizations, if you are then the owner or have access to an organization, you can click on the settings for that organization. On the left, you have secrets, as you would expect, and actions. You can create all of your AWS secrets at this level, and then programmatically decide which of your repos have access to these variables. That means ideally you set this up once and then can use that for the rest of your deployments. Setting up your secrets in this way at an organizational level is a lot more efficient than having to set it up for every new repo you make. So if you are going to be using multiple repos or doing lots of small microservices, then I would definitely recommend going and setting up a GitHub organization and using the organization secrets. In this video, we've learned why and how we can set up GitHub Actions to deploy different environments to different AWS accounts. We've also then looked at other things we can do to improve our GitHub Actions workflows, such as adding conditional statements which decide for certain environments I want to run these certain steps, whereas for other environments I might not. This can be used for a huge range of things, such as in your QA and production environments, running smoke tests after the deployment has happened. We also looked at how we can set up our organizational secrets so that we can share a single set of secrets for each account across multiple repos. If you've liked this video, then you might also like this video where we learn to create WebSockets with Serverless Framework.